Welcome to the PV Magazine Roundtables USA program. For the last 6 years, we have brought experts from across the industry supply chain to our stage to discuss issues of reliability, quality, and performance. Today is no different other than that we are live broadcasting around the world and into your home. You now have the opportunity to network, connect, and actively participate in the conversation throughout the program by asking questions directly to our speakers and panelists as they come, and you can upvote those of others. Thank you for joining us. I'm Erica Johnson, Managing Editor at PV Magazine, and your host for today's program.
And I'm Marian Willuhn, also editor with PV Magazine and your co-host for today's program. We're glad that you are joining us for our second digital roundtable conference that we're holding this year. We may be monitoring screens sitting miles apart, but we have designed a program and an event platform for you to engage and connect with your industry peers and build your networks across the solar and storage industries.
I think that many of us would agree that this year has been quite unlike any other. 2020 has been saturated in change, not only globally, but particularly within the United States. COVID-19, extreme weather and climate-related events, a mass movement for social justice and equality, and most recently, elections bringing about a change in governance. But the United States solar sector is a resilient one. COVID-19 sent shockwaves throughout the industry, particularly hitting the residential and C&I markets, but the US remains the second largest market globally, and there has been a strong rebound. SEIA estimates 18 gigawatts of solar PV capacity to be installed this year, which is leaps ahead of last year's 13.3 gigawatts and just 6% shy of annual projections.
Well, we're taking the unique challenges of the US market into account, and we have developed a diverse program for you. Focusing on resiliency in the wake of change, we have prepared 2 roundtables, that is quality and advanced technologies. Kicking it off today, the quality roundtable will focus on building resilient PV systems in the face of extreme weather events, for example, hail, wind, or wildfires. This will be followed by a dialogue in the implications of these weather events for the O&M sector. And then later today, we will have the Advanced Technologies Roundtable, where we will dig into the storage market and how it's moving towards greater market maturity. And of course, no discussion on advanced technologies in the PV sector in 2020 can be held without talking about large form factor modules and bigger cells.
At the end of each roundtable, be sure to get involved in the networking opportunities, either one-on-one or in the Zoom room, and take the chance to meet our speakers. It's important to note that none of this would have been possible without the support of our partners. We would like to especially thank our platinum sponsors, DuPont and Trimark Associates. You can also meet our partners in their expo area or via chat. Take a look around, explore the virtual event space. There is additional program content to enjoy outside of this main stage event. As a participant in this program, you can explore the event space in several tabs of your web browser, meaning you can watch the stream in one window and explore the virtual space in another. If you're having technical issues at any point throughout the event, you can contact us via the info booth for real-time support. And if you miss a session, don't worry, we have publishing of the videos of the event and PDFs after the presentations. All right, enough with the digital housekeeping. Let's get this show started.
Well, before getting into the meat and potatoes of today's event, we will bring to you a keynote from one of the most influential clean energy entrepreneurs in America. He is the president and co-founder of global sustainable infrastructure investment company Generate Capital. He was also the founder and CEO of SunEdison, where he pioneered the no money down solar model. He also written a book, Creating Climate Wealth, Unlocking the Impact Economy. As if this wasn't already enough, he's also the founding CEO of the Carbon War Room, a global nonprofit founded by Sir Richard Branson and Virgin Unite to help entrepreneurs address climate change.
And I personally have been a big fan of Jigar's for years, tuning into the weekly Energy Gang podcast. With no further ado, opening up our discussion on the resiliency of the PV sector in the US market, it is our great honor to welcome Jigar Shah. Hi, Jigar. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey, how are you?
Doing very well. Thank you for zooming in. Great. We're going to go ahead and pass it over to you.
So I want to thank everyone for having me. It's really a great pleasure to be here. I think that when you think about 2020, it has been a year of resiliency. So the whole year has been about how resilient can we be. So I'm super excited for this discussion, and I'm really happy that we're having this discussion today, Cara PV Magazine. So I just really want to thank everyone for being here. The topic today is really important because for a long time, the PV industry has been viewed as being backed up by the grid, right? The whole point of the PV industry has been that you can connect the solar PV to the grid, and that if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter because we have plenty of coal and natural gas and nuclear and other technologies to back up the grid. Today, solar is becoming so large that we are our own backup. And so you're finding that on a regular basis, most of us are adding battery backup to our solar projects. And we are adding other types of technologies like natural gas backup generators to microgrids. And so we're in a very unique position where solar PV is making the transition to really becoming a reliable resource that can power very critical loads. And here at Generate Capital, we made our first investment in this space 4 years ago for Santa Rita School District. And it's been a learning experience. The software needed to be better. The hardware wasn't quite what we thought it would be. We've made fixes, but you can imagine that it hasn't been easy to do. The financing community has not been fully engaged in tax equity or in debt. And so the whole program needs work. And that's why I'm very pleased that this conference is happening and these conversations are happening, because I think it is the next step. One of the most shocking things happened yesterday, where the California Energy Commission, which is normally a very reliable supporter of this revolution, approved 650 megawatts of new diesel generators to be installed in Silicon Valley in the heart of California to back up critical infrastructure. The commissioners are very smart people, and they were not convinced that solar with natural gas engines, with batteries, were capable of providing the level of service necessary to meet the needs of the massive California economy. And so what I'd like to take you through is some of the anatomy of that conversation and really make sure that we understand what we have to do as an industry to make this successful. I think the first thing we have to do is to accept that natural gas is critical for multi-day outages, and that many people, even within our own industry, have installed natural gas backup generators at our homes. I have not, but many others have, to be able to get through up to 6 days of power outages in California from the wildfires. And so I think it's important for us to recognize that while we're moving away from natural gas as a critical fuel to power the grid, that we are not there yet, and that many of our clients need that kind of power backup to really make sure that they are feeling secure and that their businesses can feel secure that they can run, right? So these are companies like Scale Microgrid Systems, Enchanted Rock, and others that are providing these types of services. I think the next thing to recognize is that when you think about battery storage, batteries are simply a really dumb piece of hardware, right? A number of sort of AA batteries put together into a massive sort of pack, right? But the interface of that battery with the solar is still being figured out. So whether you're doing DC charging, right, or whether that battery is producing power that's being converted directly into AC, or whether the whether all of the power, directly powers DC loads within the building, this architecture is something that we're still creating. Separately, when you think about all the programs that are being offered today, whether it's FERC Order 2222, or whether it's FERC Order 745, or whether it's some of the other programs for demand response or DERs, the software that is currently available today to sit on top of the hardware for the batteries is still not ready to go. So we are building a tremendous amount of capacity, but the software is not really ready for prime time. And so you have a number of companies doing great work here, whether it's Tesla or Sonnen or even Generac systems with Pica. And what you're finding, which is the system I actually have in my basement, but when you think about the applicability of all these, it's actually quite difficult and quite poor. So for instance, I'm thinking about adding a fuel cell to my system, right? But the battery doesn't come with a plug and play ability to plug in a fuel cell. And so today I would have to call in a favor from the technicians at Generac Pica to be able to handle this. It's not something that's plug and play in the field. And so I want to make sure that we're all cognizant of where we are, which is that we have all the puzzle pieces to make this work, but we don't quite have the respect of the banking sector and the finance sector to really be able to deploy this at scale. I would say the next piece of this is the resiliency sector. So we think about a new administration coming into the United States, but that new administration has already said that it's interested in supporting a resilient infrastructure. So for instance, in 8 years ago, we already determined that all US military bases had to be able to run without backup power from the grid because of a couple of high profile incidences that occurred, particularly in Florida. And so 8 years later, that really hasn't been done with clean energy. There are substantial solar projects, substantial battery projects, and the Trump administration has continued that work because the Department of Defense is committed to it. But it's still not really ready to go. The vast majority of military bases in the United States, in order to run smoothly, has decided that it really needs diesel backup generators. Diesel backup generators, by the way, that are very expensive and generally poorly maintained. So it's not clear that they're even available. But when you think about the decision makers in the process, they continue to believe that these are essential. Separately, you have municipalities, right? In the United States, we have over 2,000 rural co-ops and small municipal utilities that have the ability to take their entire cities and towns off grid, right? In the event of a tornado or increasing numbers of hurricanes, right? We went through the entire numbering system this year and had to go into Greek letters because we had so many hurricanes. So many people are saying, look, the tax revenue that we generate from our community is worth it. It's worth it to spend an extra amount of money to put in a whole town backup system, right? To be able to do this. So there are cities in across the country that are looking at 35, 45, 50 megawatt systems anchored by natural gas today, but using large amounts of solar and battery backup to be able to back up their entire towns. These types of microgrids are increasingly being looked at as a way for entire cities and towns to become resilient. And we have the infrastructure within the rural electric cooperatives, as well as municipal utilities, to access very cheap capital from the US Department of Agriculture to be able to finance these things. So you can get to USDA loan guarantees and 3% interest financing to finance these projects. But I think there is an acknowledgement that while we can do these with solar and batteries, and I believe natural gas fast ramp units, we are continuing to be doubted by players in the field. So whether it's the California Energy Commission, or whether it's the California Independent System Operator, or whether it's the City of New York, or whether it's Washington, D.C., I would say that our industry has not done a good job of proving to the powers that be that we can meet a certain threshold. On top of that, I think we also have to keep in mind that the brands matter. Our industry has been built on small companies that have taken big chances. But when you move to backing up cities and towns or backing up entire military bases, I think that the brands like Wartzilla or Lockheed Martin or Schneider Electric or SNC Electric or Northrop Grumman come to mind. These are the kinds of companies that have been accepted by the military brass, as well as other security experts, as being able to provide this kind of backup power. So either we need to bring our heavyweights, NextEra's, Southern companies, EDFs, EPDR, to be able to prove that they can provide this level of reliability, or we need to actually educate the brass that they're thinking about this the wrong way. There have been plenty of microgrid conferences that you and I have attended over the past few years to be able to do that. Or lastly, we may need to bring these other brands in that already have the respect of the community to be able to sell our services within the established frameworks that are available to receive very low cost subsidized financing from the US government and then increasingly the EU Green Deal. And so I think it's critical for us to think through what steps we need to take as an industry, because as we move from pilot projects with school districts like Santa Rita School District that Generate participated in, to massive deployments with California CCAs, which are consumer choice aggregations, to military bases, to entire cities and towns. My sense is that we will have to think clearly and deeply about what it will take to convince people to bet the entire livelihoods of their communities on our technologies. We have not yet hit that threshold. And when we attempt to hit that threshold, I think we as an industry will have arrived and be able to unlock this next $1 trillion opportunity. One last point I would make is that the island that matters the most in the United States is the island of Puerto Rico. The island of Puerto Rico faced a massive hurricane a few years ago. The money that was allocated to rebuild their grid has been held up due to political pressures for almost 3 years. And that money will be released any day now. That money will be $13 billion that will be available to the island to shore up PREPA. And that contract has been awarded to people that are basically going to rebuild the previous grid. Companies like AES have come in and said that Puerto Rico should be rebuilt as a series of interconnected microgrids. But that vision for Puerto Rico has not been accepted. And I would say that the vast majority of the clean energy industry in the United States has not really participated in a way that is meaningful in Puerto Rico. And so while Puerto Rico has agreed to 100% clean energy standards, while the two governors who fought a really tough race, both the Democrat and the Republican, both the conservative and the liberal, have embraced clean energy. We as an industry have not invested our time, our effort, and our influence in Puerto Rico to be able to help them build back better, right? We have not attempted to really do that. And the last time this occurred, which was in Haiti, the Obama administration preferred a solution of propane from Venezuela and LNG into the Dominican Republic to solve the problems of Haiti. Now, Haiti, as you may know, has ended up going to microgrids anyway, because it was the most secure way of dealing with the political realities in Haiti. But now that this is happening to a US territory in Puerto Rico, I do believe that we have some big challenges in front of us as an industry. And we must agree to rise to those challenges, both in Puerto Rico and in California, where the California regulators, while they trust us and believe in us, have not given us the mandate to really provide the backup power necessary to prevent the worst impacts of the power outages in that state. And so, again, I would say to you, we are in a great position. Our industry is doing fantastic work, but we have much more work to do. That the level and the of acceptance that we need, the level of technical acumen that we have to show, the level of brand awareness, and the level of financeability, bankability that we have to achieve has not yet been made. And so I thank all of you for the time you've given me to address you here today and the work that you do tirelessly every day to help decarbonize our planet. It is our shoulders that people are depending on to be able to bring this vision to full reality and to employ hundreds of thousands of additional people in this time of pandemic and crisis to put people back to work. So thank you so much. I really look forward to the roundtables and look forward to hearing more from everyone.
Great. Thank you so much, Jigar, for these words today and providing some insights. You laid it out beautifully as far as the program that we have today. So thank you for this and for all that you've done for our industry over the years.
Thank you also from my side, Jigar. It looks like we have a mountain of work ahead of us, figuring out all these things and building trust as an industry to the decision makers. But this is what we're here to do at PV Magazine, obviously facilitating this discourse and building this trust.
Okay, thank you for joining us for PV's Quality Roundtable, our flagship event that traditionally would be brought to you at solar trade shows around the world. The focus of this year's Quality Roundtable is building PV for resiliency, which we've briefly touched on. We'll spend the first half of the event discussing extreme weather, hail, wind, and fires, followed by a session on modern O&M practices in the United States for maintaining resiliency.
We have a full program, and I'm sure I want to encourage you to please get engaged and ask your questions. But please do understand, we may not be able to get all of your questions answered live. So you might want to consider upvoting the questions that are relevant also to you from your other participants, and be reminded we have breakout sessions prepared. There's ample opportunity to network together with the speakers before and after each of the roundtable sessions, and also during the sessions you can communicate and network with fellow attendees. Again, should you have any issues with the technology, we've got you covered. There's an info booth, it's well staffed, and you should be able to get the help that you need, should you need any. Now, let's get on with the program. We have collected the field data, we have investigative cases, and we have brought in the experts to discuss the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead for the PV sector in the US.
Amidst the plethora of changes in the US market, we are experiencing an uptake in both the intensity and frequency of weather-related events. Simultaneously, we're encountering technological advancements and innovations that are shifting within solar manufacturing. Excuse me, maintaining high performance and reliability among these changes is of the utmost importance to ensure security of PV assets and investments. Kicking off today's discussion with recent issues from the field, it is our absolute pleasure to introduce Kaushik Roy Choudhury, Global Technical Leader at DuPont Photovoltaic Solutions. Hi, Kaushik.
Hello there.
Hi, thank you
How
for
are
joining
you?
us today. Doing well, how are you?
Good.
Great. I'm gonna go ahead and pass it over to you for the presentation.
Sure. I think I'm sharing my screen now. Am I? Okay, good. Thank you. Thanks to the organizers for giving me this opportunity to open up this quality roundtable discussion. And as Erica mentioned, I'll be hitting it off with examples from the field, both around the regular degradation that modules and other components go through, but with the extra twist that now we have inclement and extremes of weather that play a role in it. Again, my name is Kaushik Roy Choudhury. I'm the Global Technical Leader of Photovoltaic Reliability in DuPont Photovoltaic Solutions. And with that, let me hit it off. Okay, so in short, why is long-term field reliability important? DuPont has been doing a lot of field-related work for several years now. And what we are finding is that after a few years, some modules are actually showing up quite a bit of defects in the field. And this is not good because field failures after a few years can actually impact the return on investment that asset owners are expecting. So in general, the modules may not be able to last 25, 30 years, at least not all modules. On top of it, as Rika was mentioning, we do have rapidly changing module technologies, which make it even harder to assess their field reliability because these things have not been in the field for long. And then finally, we all know modules are all not created equal. They have different components to them, different bill of materials, including cell technologies, module packaging technologies, and materials. And all of these come together to ensure long-term reliability. So we need to keep an eye out on them. What I'm showing here on the right are results from our field work. Over years, and I'm showing the data over here from 2015 to 2020, we have seen that overall module defects are kind of creeping up. And as an example of one of the components where I'm plotting in this graph, we're also seeing some components, for example, the backsheet defects are also creeping up. That at least asks us to take a pause and take a closer look at what's going on. We did try to establish some amount of correlation between when modules go bad, they need to be replaced in a lot of cases, and what kind of impact does it have on the LCOE. This is a study that we did on 4 different installations, and what we see here, we are plotting the change in LCOE or the increase in the levelized cost of electricity if modules are replaced somewhere in the project that was not expected. And we see that the increase in LCOE can be in the range of 20 to 40%, depending on some modest replacement of modules around 20%. So that again is important in this case. What are we seeing from the field? I mentioned that DuPont has been doing a lot of field inspections and analysis. What type of defects are we seeing? Again, not earth-shattering information, but these are all important. We are seeing cell defects, interconnect defects around the typical corrosions and hotspots, and I'll show some stuff around this. We are seeing backsheet defects, encapsulant defects, and some other defects along with, so most of the information that I'll be sharing will be focused around modules, but equally important are other balance of system materials. The other point that I'm trying to make over here with these bar graphs is that year on year, these defects are either holding steady or slightly going up across these different material classes, all the way from cells, backsheets, encapsulants, and other materials. Now, as we all know, folks who have been working in the field of module reliability and defects in the field, module degradation is a pretty complex matter. You have the material components. On top of that, you have their own degradation paths. And on top of that, you have all the different weather patterns. And these interactions actually result in some cases power losses. On the left, I'm showing here visible material degradation, things that you do pick up in the field, which may not lead to immediate power losses. For example, yellowing of the encapsulant initially or snail trails may not lead to significant power losses. On the other hand, there could be some visible degradation or even visually inconspicuous stuff, things that you do not pick up that can have power losses. So for example, potential induced degradation, cell cracking from handling, which might not be apparent originally. Some type of backsheet defects, which are obvious, but they don't lead to power losses immediately. but in the long run they do. So combined with this kind of confusing information from the field, on top of that, we have these extreme weather events, and the focus of this talk, this session today. What do we see there? So again, we have some examples which have immediate impact on the power losses in the form of module and balance of system degradation, and then some others which do not have an immediate impact, but they do have impact on the longer term. I'm showing here examples of hail damage. This is from the Southwest US. The immediate impact is obviously cracked glass on the front, which results in cracked cells. We can all understand that this can result in power losses immediately. However, in the long run, these cracked cells can actually lead to localized high temperatures on the module, which in turn can result in burning of some of the packaging materials. Now you are facing not only a power loss in the initial phase, but also on the longer term a safety issue and more power loss. Similarly, if we look at flood damages or prolonged periods of water logging, I'm showing here an example from Northwest India. What we have seen is due to the prolonged water logging, not only do we have degrading sealants, as is shown here, or corrosion in the junction boxes, but in the live operation of the plant, beyond that, we can have serious arcing issues. In the longer term, moisture ingress into the modules can actually lead to delamination and other such things. Finally, the last example on this page is around fire damage. We see modules charred. It's easy to pick up modules that have completely gone bad under a fire event. However, in some cases, the effect is not very apparent. I'm showing here a back sheet that shows blistering and rippling. The module in this case is not affected visibly. In the long run, however, we have seen changes to the materials that can lead to issues in the module safety as well as stability. So next on, I'll just end this initial part by pointing to some materials that we can control, that are within our control, so that we can mitigate some of these impacts of the weather or extreme weathers. I'm showing here an example of a technological change in the module packaging. So we all know that in modern times, modules are becoming bigger and bigger, and in order to counter some of the increased weight, the front glass of the modules have been changed from the 3.2 mm traditional thickness to the 2.5 mm or even lowered down to the 2 millimeters thickness. Not only that, the glass type has changed from fully tempered to a heat strengthened glass. What this has given rise to is a higher propensity to crack damage. So I'm showing here a couple of examples of cracking due to impact and another from high temperatures. And on the right, I'm showing the blue bar is for the typical 3.2 mm glass in an impact test. We are seeing a much higher resilience to impact in the 3.2 mm glass versus the 2 mm glass. Similarly, the case of larger modules leading to higher chances of hotspots. In this case as well, the front glass, which was 3.2 mm fully tempered, is much better equipped to handle that versus the 2 mm semi-tempered glass. And finally, another example from the fire case that I showed in the last slide. Here's a type of backsheet which is very widely deployed in PV installations across the globe. I had shown this picture on the previous chart where we had seen some peculiar marks and sort of ripples and bubbles on the backsheet, although the module itself was performing well. Now, when we dig a little bit deeper, this is infrared spectroscopy on the module material itself, and we are comparing the data for this module versus other modules which have not been exposed to such a thermal event or fire event, what we see here is that versus modules which have not been exposed, this material has now become much more crystallized with the increase of this, which is called the alpha phase. This material comes in 2 different phases. But anyway, what it's showing us is that this material has now become much more brittle, and in the long run can actually crack. So what we are seeing here is the confluence of extreme weather and some material instabilities, which is aggravating the issue of degradation in these materials. So with that, I just want to leave with this final thought before we dig into the panel. We really need to balance technological improvements and cost reduction initiatives with longer-term reliability in the field, so to ensure that the asset owners, their investments are protected in the long run. Thank you, and back to you, Erica.
Thank you, Kaushik, for joining us today and opening up this dialogue, sharing some of DuPont's research into what nature can and will throw at modules over the lifetime of their system. We look forward to welcoming you back to our program's panel dialogue to dig into this a bit further after we share the state of extreme weather events in the United States.
Sure.
Considered by many to be the greatest challenge of our time, climate change is now impacting every continent on the face of the planet, threatening our precious ecosystems and life on Earth as we know it. Deep and rapid decarbonization is necessary, and an increasing number of local and state governments across the United States are now pledging to achieve 100% clean energy supply by 2050 or sooner. The future is definitely looking bright for our industry as the front runner of renewable technologies. Solar PV had made up for 38% of all new US electricity generating capacity in the first half of 2020 and is well poised to play a powerful and promising position in the energy transition. While solar plus storage will be a crucial part of our national clean energy future, extreme weather events and their associated PV damages are on the rise.
Well, it's a well-told story by now. A warming climate brings with it more fierce tropical storms, and the severity of hurricanes making landfall in the US is already being well above historical means. And that leads to a revised risk assessment of wind damages and flooding. Now, other extreme events, such as tornadoes, hailstorms, and wildfires, cause significant economic effects to the nation's PV fleet. Climate scientists, they're also not really spreading any hope, as they expect the number of extreme weather events to increase, and also the frequency and severity of these events will increase in the years to come. Let's take a look at the data here. What we're seeing here is a graph from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association called NOAA. And they have counted the number of events, natural disaster events or climate and weather-related events, which have caused damages above $1 billion US dollars. So in the last 40 years, the total amount was 1.8 trillion US dollars, which have been caused in damages. And then if you take the average between 1980 and 2019, this has been 6.6. So there were, on average per year, 6.6 events like this. If we narrow that time frame a little bit to show how it's actually getting worse the further we get, you see the colorized curves here. Those are between 2015 and 2019. And the average of those is jumping to 13.8. It's already twice that number.
And you can see in the red 2020 where the numbers have gotten even higher and more severe.
Precisely. So the red number here, the red curve here, it's hit 16 already now in October. And what we're seeing is that this year has been particularly bad for the US in terms of climate, and weather-related disasters. 16 events have caused damages over 1 billion. That was 11 severe storms, 3 tropical cyclones, 1 drought, and 1 wildfire. While looking at this, it's also important to notice what we don't see in these numbers, and that is there were numerous other storms, hail events or wildfires in the US taking place, affecting communities and PV systems. They're not shown here because they might not have surpassed the 1 billion threshold. On the other hand, what we haven't seen in the last graph was how far above the 1 billion threshold these events were. There might have been 1.1 billion, there might have been 10 billion.
Sure. Yeah, this obviously creates additional concern for the industry in protecting our assets. While no location is going to be completely safe from unprecedented events pertaining to weather and the climate, renewable energy and infrastructure will be critical for us to restore power in the communities following such events. The past few years of wildfire catastrophes, while amplifying the growth of storage in California, have created significant disruption to our energy supply, devastating impacts to our communities, property, and PV assets alike. Moving to the east, where we are witnessing a significant increase in intense rainfall events, hail damage is also becoming an ever more critical risk for our industry supply chain to consider as more and more states in these areas are deploying large-scale, big-budget solar projects.
Building for PV for resiliency before and after an extreme event is really all about quality. We cannot control the weather. We cannot control where a wildfire starts or where the ash of it is going to fall down. The size and velocity of hailstones, that's also not up to us. What is in our control is the quality of manufacturing processes, the sound engineering that goes into the design of modules or other PV equipment, and of course the deployment of the right O&M strategies, which can help us to minimize the impacts of extreme weather events. To give you some perspective on this, renewable energy insurance provider G-Cube in 2018 said that 50% of North American insurance claims in the PV industry came from weather-related events, and that's reason enough for us to really dig into this topic today.
Yeah. At this critical time of unprecedented events, growing industry knowledge is going to be essential for us to help manage this risk. Last Way's infamous Midway solar project in Texas sent shockwaves throughout the industry to investors and insurers alike. The damage to the more than 400,000 modules in the solar farm recorded hail damage losses estimated to be between $70 and $80 million US. Kicking off this session, we're going to turn our eyes to a little bit less reported of extreme hail event now. Joining us from Washington, D.C., PV Magazine USA journalist Kay Kaufmann has investigated on yet another extreme hail event from 2019 for this year's quality case. Good morning, Kay.
Good morning, Erica. Good to see you.
Likewise, nice to see you as well. I'm going to go ahead and kick it straight over to you.
Fantastic. All right, good morning, everyone. And thank you, Erica, and thank you, Kaushik, for providing such a good overview of the issues related to extreme weather risk for solar. Now I want to bring us down to ground level with a case study from North Carolina. And at this point, I would like to thank Core Energy Works for providing a lot of the information I'll be presenting here, and also PI Berlin for their support. So, oops, there we go. Okay, we're going to start with the obvious. Hail happens, and in the US, it happens a lot. The figures here are from the National Weather Service Storm Prediction Center. In 2019, the US had 5,396 storms with large hail, which means over 1 inch diameter. And the year-to-date here in the US, we're down a little bit to 4,585 storms. The map on the left shows that pretty much from the Rockies east Most of the United States is at some level of risk for 1-inch hail. The hail belt for 2-inch hail is more concentrated, as you can see, in Texas, the Great Plains, and to a lesser extent into the Midwest. That said, there are always outliers, as is the case with this project in North Carolina. The project is 5 megawatts and about just under 20,000 panels on single axis trackers. And it is owned by Duke Energy. And at the time of the storm, it was about 7.5 years old. The storm we are talking about happened in the spring of 2019. And as you can see from the pictures here, which were posted to Twitter at the time of the storm, we are talking about baseball-sized hail. Okay. Excuse me. According to a local article in the local newspaper, over 100 vehicles were damaged and acres of crops were also damaged as well. Now, Core Energy Works did a damage assessment. They found the hail at this solar project was not quite as large as baseballs, but it was still quite sizable. And the intensity was certainly, you know, there was very concentrated hail because the average hits for each of the panels with broken glass was 47 hits per panel. As you can see here, 30%, more than 30% of the panels, which comes to about 6,000 panels, had cracked glass. Another 21% of the panels had internal micro cracking. Now, in addition to their assessment, Core Energy also did some lab tests to look at the vulnerability of different types of solar panels to hail damage. And before anyone asked, no, I was not able to ascertain exactly which types of panels were used in the testing. We've just got A, B, C, D, and E. So the first test looked at the force measured in joules of kinetic energy that was required to hit a threshold where microcracking started. And the size of the hail that was used for this, or ice balls that were used for this test, was about 1.5 inches in diameter. And the speeds tested were from 54 miles per hour to 125 miles per hour. As you can see, the threshold varied, but according to Core Energy, based on the results here, all of the panels that were cracked in, all of the panels at the site would have been heavily damaged. Okay, the other test they did was a hailstorm stress test, which was looking at how many strikes were needed to cause a 5% loss in electrical output for the panels. And here the results again varied. One panel lost 5% after just 7 strikes. Another one lasted for 25 strikes. But Core Energy did note in their study that the results here indicate that some interplay between cell damage and interconnection configuration could affect performance after hailstorm damage. But again, if we go back to the fact that there were 47 hits per panel at the project, a great many of those panels could have lost 5% or more of their production. So clearly, this case study and others like Midway, certainly, as people have already said, raise critical questions about quality, standards, and testing. Are we doing enough to mitigate the risk of such events, or As Ian Gregory of PI Berlin suggests here, is it more a matter of pushing better compliance and testing? With that, I want to thank everyone for listening, for your time and attention, and I'll kick it back to you, Erica.
Thank you, Kay. While the phenomena of hail isn't new, large-scale PV plant deployment in these areas seems to be growing and as well.
That is correct. Hold on one second. I've talked with several experts recently while I have been researching this topic. And what's coming up is that insurance rates are getting kicked up because of hail damage. And that obviously affects financing. What we're hearing is that, manufacturers and developers need to pick up their game to shore up the confidence of investors and financiers.
Yeah, and there is a great need to share information among the industry, but also to define what it is that we know and don't know surrounding hail resistance in order for us to evolve in these markets. Kay, please stick around for the moderation of our panel discussion.
Glad to. Thank you so much, Erica.
Thanks. Now, let's talk about weathering the storm for PV and get into our quality discussion with the experts. Be sure to submit your questions throughout the live discussion and upvote those of others to be brought forth at the Q&A session after the panel. Resiliency comes from a collaborative industry effort, and we're bringing in a variety of players into today's session. I would like to welcome back the experts, welcoming back to the stage. Kaushik Roy Choudhury, Global Technical Leader at DuPont Photovoltaic Solutions. On the EBOS side, Jeff Wang, Business Development of Alternative Energies for North America at Staubli Electrical Connectors.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and hi, Erica.
Hi, welcome. Our independent expert, Daniel Chang, VP of Business Development at PV Testing Lab, RETC.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for joining. And Alex Riddell, Senior Director of Design and Engineering at NextTracker, who have done a lot of work on the topic of extreme weather. Thank you all so much for joining us. So,
thank you, Erica.
And thank you. We're going to go ahead and start this off. What I'd like to do is do a quick lightning round, just 30 seconds, 1 minute each, please, because I know we have a lot to cover surrounding, based on what we've heard today with the case study that was presented. How important of an issue is this right now for the U.S. market? Let's go ahead and get started with you, Daniel.
Yep. This is actually a very pertinent topic today because we're in the middle of a lot of changes in the product that we're all used to. These changes are a response to the demand for higher efficiency panels, lower cost, lower BOS, and essentially it's a perfect storm with the onset of installations being more and more prevalent in hail-prone regions. And it's become more important than ever to understand what those changes are. And I think that's the response that we're seeing from the insurance companies, where they want to qualify and quantify the type of issues that they're seeing before they insure. And so I think it's very, very important that we do proper testing and understand the bill of materials, what changes are happening, and the best way to do that is to actually test beyond the standards.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. And Kaushik?
Yep, absolutely. I mean, it was very well captured by Daniel in his few words. It's an important thing, and as I think in agreement with Daniel, I'd like to say that with the very fast changing technologies, with now modules becoming bigger, everyone's trying to make them lighter, and with the immense pressure of lowering the cost, I think again this is a perfect mix when you now put in the ingredient of these changing weather patterns with more extreme weathers. So I couldn't stress any further that the importance of proper testing, ensuring the reliability of the materials to balance out with the technological improvements. I think it's absolutely important.
Thank you. Thank you. And Alex at Next Tracker,
Yeah, great. Thank you for having me.
thanks for
I
joining us.
think overall, people need to start associating why this is becoming a big issue. What we've seen throughout the presentations right here is a lot of discussions of what is causing the issue, but now we need to switch that to what is the solution, right? So all these insurance industries are raising rates because they're catching up to all these catastrophes. So it's important to recognize how these hailstorms are created. Why we're associated with them is because solar is going into the high risk regions right now. Texas is probably getting more solar than anywhere in the world. So the vendor you choose, what module you select, all these things matter. And we're going to talk about how these solutions can change and help you get rid of the risk and lower your insurance rates.
Great, thank you for that. And then I would also like to kick it over to Jeff.
So for DC cabling system to weather the storm, the basic problem lies at the best practice of your cabling systems and also your component selections. And the good news is that all these two main aspects doesn't cost the owner extra money usually, or very fractional money, but if you do it right at the beginning with the right correct knowledge, you can avoid a lot of problems down the road. So yes, I'll be always here to share our know-how with the end customers to avoid DC cabling problem during the extreme weather events.
Great, great. Thank you for that. And let's go ahead and get started with the full discussion.
Okay. All right, we're going to start by talking about standards. And my first question is for Daniel. Daniel, right now, I think we all know the elephant in the room is IEC 61215. At least in the past, and certainly still, many modules are only being tested for 1-inch hail and being certified for 1-inch hail. Do we need a new standard? Do we need to revise 61215? I know RETC is doing some work around this.
Right. Yeah, thanks for highlighting that. It's actually very important because over the years and the 11 years that RETC has been around testing modules, and according to the IEC standards that are out there, I think it's pretty safe to say this, but not one single module has ever failed that IEC test from the modules that we've tested. So for the hail. So what does that mean, right? If everything fails, there must be a reason why the change standard must be kind of, I don't know if it's changed yet, but maybe looked at closely and maybe modified to be more pertinent to today's what we're dealing with today. What we do at RETC, we've actually developed the Hail Durability Test Program, the HDT, which is taking into combination both different hail sizes, take into consideration the different velocities and the resulting kinetic energy, and all the changes that we would actually see in, for example, West Texas. Not only do we hit the module with hail, but we also take into consideration the thermal cycling that the modules that we'll be going through. They're not just going to sit there in 25 degrees C, kind of an ideal scenario, right? Modules are going to actually feel the sun, feel hot spots, feel the thermal cycling that normal modules do. So we thought of that. We also thought of different characterizations that are going to be resulting from that. So from doing the HDT, the classification of modules that result, whether it's class A, class B, class C, it's similar to the fire ratings that we're kind of all used to. But the idea is the insurance companies can now understand and really quantify. I think that's the key word here. And it's similar to what Alex said earlier about the BOS. What are we doing about that, right? That's kind of identifying the problem. What are we doing? And what I see is from the industry, the different stowing methods that Nextracker has pioneered, for example. That's one way that we've seen a huge improvement in hail kind of resistivity, for example. We've seen improvements in bill of materials, whether it be the backside encapsulant from DuPont, the clear side. We've seen good results. We're seeing a reaction to the testing that we're seeing. But again, to answer your question, we need to go beyond the IEC standard, just because how I started off with, everybody passed. So that must mean something, right? Everybody passes that test. So we need to start looking into it further and improving on what type of focus needs to be on the different types of hail sizes and the way they're installed. Also, I think that's very important. Not just hitting it with a 1-inch hail at an ideal perpendicular angle.
Right.
That's the past, and that's what we can say with relative empirical data.
So what are the sizes of hail and velocities that your tests are using? You talked about a range.
Yes, we have a range. Of course, the standard, of course, we've seen is at 25 meters, 25 millimeter, 1-inch that we're all used to from the IEC standard. Our ranges from 25, of course, during the start, all the way up to 75. We've seen West Texas hail sizes range from 35 to 51. We call that 2-inch hail, right? So a lot of our customers have chosen to qualify their modules with the 2-inch hail, which is 51. But we have different ranges. And again, this is based on the project. We're not going to just hit it with the largest size hail if it's not going to be relevant to the site that the modules are going to be at, right? So we always specify the project site and the understanding of what type of hail that maybe historically it could have been the largest size. So to answer your question, it ranges from 25, 35, 45, 51 for 2-inch, and all the way up to 75.
And at what point are you starting to see impacts? At what diameter are you really starting to see the most damages coming through on these module tests?
So that's an interesting question because damage is relative, right? What do you mean by damage? Because people can say, oh, damage is defined by glass breaking. Right. Damage is defined by power loss of more than 5%.
Yeah.
Damage is caused by micro cracks, maybe tons of micro cracks relatively. Right?
With micro cracks and then ultimately glass, what are you seeing as far as the diameter?
Right. Mm-hmm. The problem right now is that some modules are hit by these hail sizes, like large hails, but you don't see any damage. And to add on top of that, the power loss is actually very minimal. Sometimes you see a power loss of 2-3%, and you just scratch your head. And I think that's where the insurance companies are also scratching their head because they're saying, hey, the module right next to it shows a huge crack in the glass. And of course, that's binary. So that module is basically off. But next to it, there's this module that's actually, the glass is intact, but under the EO image, there's a lot of micro cracks, but the power is still really good. So that's a scary thing to have, especially as an insurer, right? And so I think that's where the HTT, the RETC Hail Durability Test Program comes in and says, hey, guess what? These micro cracks can lead to future power loss. Because you remember, modules are not there for instantaneous power. You're looking at it in a long-term, LCOE, 25, 30 years of useful asset, right? So by going through the hail durability test, you can understand what those micro cracks will end up doing in the future.
Okay.
And so,
okay.
Yeah, that to answer your question quickly. Yes,
yeah, sure. And I would like to kind of evolve this conversation talking a bit more about the modules and what's happening with the evolution of technologies right now. We have a lot of new technologies entering the market, for example, bifacial panels with thinner glass, larger wafers, and modules, and thinner cells. Kaushik, you kind of started to touch on this in your presentation, and I just wanted to see, what do we know now about the susceptibility of durability to hail? Are we increasing our risk with these technology advancements right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, I started pointing towards this in my presentation, and actually Daniel and Alex and Jeff, all of them have touched upon important points which are relevant in this respect. What we are seeing here is that as bifacial is taking over the entire PV market to some extent, growing very fast, we are seeing deployments in areas which are now more prone to weather events. And it's very important that as asset owners, as developers, we take into account that geographical factor and other things when we are going for bill of materials selection. For example, now bringing it back to the module that you were talking about, in order to reduce the overall balance of system costs, module makers have started they are trying to lower the weight of the modules, and this is what I tried to point out in my quick presentation, was that in doing so, one of the components that they are changing is the front glass, and they're going from this 3.2 mm really strong, fully tempered glass to, all the way to 2 mm semi-tempered glass, because it's very difficult to make a 3.2 mm fully tempered glass. But this change now, combined with the increased size of the module, increased footprint of the module, now puts the module at a risk of impact damage, because the 2 mm semi-tempered glass is not as strong and not as impact resistant to the impact of hail or other things in this case. And at the same time, with these larger modules, larger sized wafers, the overall thermal signature of the module is also going up, increases the chance of hotspots. Daniel also pointed to an important thing. Even if sometimes when you do not see the immediate impacts of cracked glasses, if you have cracked cells, in the longer run, these can generate hotspots. And these in turn are a threat to the module reliability as well as power performance. Now, compared to double glass, I think the transparent backsheet version, which still can afford to have a 3.2 mm thicker glass in the front, fully tempered, does offer some amount of extra resistance to things like hail. And I don't know if Daniel has seen something along those lines, but I think we have some evidence that that can make differences.
Thank you. Daniel?
Yeah, we actually have seen some improvements. So I think it's very logical, because if you look, we have seen, again, to Kaushik's point, we have seen a decrease in the thickness of glass because you're sandwiching two pieces of glass, between the cells, right? So when you have a front side glass that's facing the outside environment, and then hits something like hail would hit it, 3.2 millimeter has been seen as a good size, and we've seen good results from that.
Interesting.
Okay, our next question is for Alex. You were talking before about solutions, and I know Nextracker recently released a white paper talking about stow angles. The conventional wisdom in the past for high wind was to stow panels flat, which of course left them very vulnerable to hail. At this point, we're hearing different opinions on what the optimal stow angle is for hail, whether it's vertical, whether it's slanted. So wanted to first get what your take is on the optimal stow angle, and also in terms of the direction for orienting panels.
Yeah, great. I think let's start with why hail happens, and then we can get into the stow angle. So why does hail happen? First off, it happens because of thunderstorms. Right now, there's a bit of a fallacy out there that it's also associated with hurricanes. However, hurricanes have a very warm core. And so when you look at the map that you put up previously, you notice it's away from the coast, okay? Then second, that hail alley that's happening right there. What's happening in the US is elevation is increasing in that portion, okay? And then when you also look at the seasonality of these thunderstorms, okay? In West Texas, it's more common for those thunderstorms to happen in the spring, so meaning it's cold, right? Cold plus elevation equals large hail. And when you showed your presentation in North Carolina, very typical cold in May, a cold thunderstorm, where the rest of the US is getting somewhere in the late seasons like July, August, et cetera. And then you look at the coldness, right? And you think about why big hail happens, okay? It's because it's cold, and associated with hail is not just how big it is, but the angle on which it goes down, okay? And the larger hail, how it shoots out of that thunderstorm is straight down. And a lot of people talk about wind speed associated with hail, but what's also associated with hail is fall rate, okay? That fall rate is really important for the big hail that comes straight down. The smaller hail will actually be thrown to the side of the thunderstorm, and it will melt as it goes closer to the earth. So when you associate those things, that you realize the hail that you want to prevent goes straight down. It's big and it falls fast, okay? And then also within that, while we're vulnerable, is if you realize that it comes from thunderstorms, you're going to realize that the wind speeds associated with thunderstorms are going to be around 25 miles per hour to about 80 miles per hour. And during that time, you could be tracking within it, right? So if you put yourself at solar noon during one of those big thunderstorms in that hail alley that you showed before, you're going to be very vulnerable to be perpendicular to that hail. So when you look at that, preventing that first crack is huge, right? So if you rotate as far over as possible, you're going to be away from that incident angle and prevent damage. And as Daniel was talking about before, one panel could be completely destroyed and the one adjacent to it could be still put together. And why is that? That's because glass is a very brittle structure, right? Once you hit that first crack, just like on your windshield when you're driving your car on the freeway, it's that crack starts to propagate. So once you get that initial crack, smaller hail can start causing more damage in that same panel. So preventing that first crack is really key. And that's why quick response time of rotating to that angle at Nextracker, what we've done is, just like the rest of the world, big tech is coming for us. We're connected to our tracker system. In this COVID world, right, where we can't get out the site quickly, you need to react quickly. You can press one click of a button when you get that hail warning, rotate over, and then preventing that initial crack at the high angle is the best way to protect your asset.
Yeah, so with hailstorms coming in really fast, do asset managers need to be employing a third party weather forecast with this in order to be able to press that button? Or how do we get the trackers in position quickly enough?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot of improvement in weather forecasting these days. One of the biggest ways to figure that out is the wind speed that goes up in the thunderstorm, that updraft wind speed, and then temperature associated with that. So we've actually researched and combined with our customers. We have 8 different weather prediction software and or services that you can do from it because of thunderstorms, these ramp up rates happen very quickly. The need to respond very quickly is so important because you need to get over to that angle. Otherwise, you're going to see that cracking that we've saw earlier in those particular photos. But absolutely, has hail prediction improved? And it needs to, right? Because we're seeing more hail more often in solar areas.
Yeah, sure. Okay, thank you for that. Now I'd like to talk a little bit more about the electrical balance of systems. Jeff, what issues are you seeing come back from the field as of late in the U.S. market pertaining to extreme weather-related events? And are there some best practices for DC cabling and also connector locations?
Yeah, for DC cabling, extreme weather event, I was thinking about hurricanes and a lot of rains. So that means a lot of water. Your DC cabling system, they are actually not waterproof. They are rated for IP68, which your connector systems, which means 1 meter, 1 hour underwater. And then there's water ingression that can happen in your connectors. And this kind of problem is amplified by, thousands of magnitude when you have cross-mating. Cross-mating meaning you're connecting one brand of connector with the other manufacturer of connectors. These 2 brands of connectors, they have different engineering tolerances, so the water can get into your connectors. And that's a very tricky issue because when water inside your connectors, first of all, it affects your signal quality. So any going inside your connectors, your cabling systems is toast. And secondly, it affects your power productions. But I say it's tricky because this kind of situation can happen when the connector is wet. And a few weeks later, when the weather gets dry, the water inside your connectors gets evaporated. Then everything seems fine again. So I was talking to a big US developer a couple of days ago. He was telling me that, DC cabling system, when there's water inside, is like a black hole for their KPI. I mean, their KPI is how much energy they produce. Because they test their inverter, everything seems to be fine. They do IP tracing on their modules, everything seems to be fine. But the moisture inside the connectors really affects their power productions. And this is very, very prone when you have cross-mating happening in your site, like different type of connectors that should not be connected together.
Okay, thank you. So naturally, there's going to be additional costs that are associated with building in more resiliency from hail and extreme weather. If we're going for more glass, weather predicting services, incorporating these in, given the risk-averse nature of investors and insurers, but also a competitive market to drive down LCOE, how do we best balance the cost, technology, and risk?
Yeah, I think one thing that we could do is associate it with software, right? When you look at, oh, I don't want to make a beefier system. So how do we figure that out? And we do that with software, just like big tech and big data are associating all industries, it's affecting our equipment as well. And what's amazing is, at least with our system, because we're connected, we're actually retrofitting systems for hail and extreme weather that were built in 2015, 2016, 2017. And what's amazing with that is right now we're talking about hail, right? And guess what? We weren't talking about hail 2 years ago. So as we look at this and we try to have these modules and these systems last to 2030, 2040, 2050, what are we going to be talking about in 2025? What are we going to be talking about 2030, 2040? You know, all this extreme weather keeps getting more prevalent, more extreme, bigger hail. So the way to not get rid of having like 4-inch glass thicknesses or whatever is with software, right? That's the best way. And then also you think about the fleet sizes. We say, okay, look at, you know, what just happened in this election. A lot of solar talk. It was happening during the debates. Solar is going to be even more prominent. And so when you look at having these fleets and where solar is being installed, you say, hey, these people could be managing 200 gigawatts, 300 gigawatts at the same time. And you could be having hailstorms every single May. And so how do we get rid of that without making 4 or 5-inch glass and not change the spec? And that's through software, and that's getting through smart trackers and smart systems.
I guess to our other panelists, what are your guys' thoughts on that? Do you believe the same, that technology and AI and data of the future is going to build in the resiliency necessary given this?
Yeah, certainly, Erica. I mean, I think technology and a larger, more frequent use of the information and data, as Alex was pointing out, not only to predict what's going to happen in this year, but also have like a forward-looking aspect to it, will definitely play a big role. But I also like to point out that this kind of attitude needs to also be developed, among the asset owners, because someone, who's only concerned about developing the project and then flipping it in 4 to 5 years will not probably be as concerned about what happens in 20 to 25 years with those modules or the overall plant, versus someone who's invested in it for the 25 to 30 years. So I think from the investor's point of view, the overall value chain needs to make this, make this commitment that a little upfront investment in both the quality of the materials, as well as looking at things like software and before the commissioning, is more important for the longer term resilience of not only that particular developer, but maybe even the whole industry as a whole, So that's important.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I want to follow up on that. Seeing that we are getting more frequent, more intense hail, we have outliers like the case study in North Carolina. How do you factor in costs and mitigate risk? I mean, looking at certain regions, do you say, okay, the risk is lower here, so we can cut this cost, or maybe not test for as large hail? Again, I guess it comes back to balance. What do you need to factor in when you are making those judgments?
I can start it off, and then people can take up. Again, I think it's a balance between a right choice of the BOM and keeping in mind these new expanded areas which are more weather prone. Matching it up with proper testing. I cannot really emphasize the importance of testing, no matter where you are, be it hail or for any other forms of long-term reliability. proper testing that simulates things in the field. And then, as Alex pointed out, again, combining it with some forward-looking information that you assimilate into not only your module selection or site selection, but also operations and maintenance.
I think next tracker solution sounds great.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate that. I think that's really what's affecting our industry today, right? We look at all these different aspects, and we've focused on hail here, but there's also flood. There's wind. What we keep seeing is our once thought simplistic structures are anything but. Every single year there's another aspect associated with it. Every single year we get more complex. There's new module technologies. There's more focus on value engineering, the thinning of the glass, the thinning of the frames. It's going to farther reaches where we have so much solar in the Southeast. And really, we've been underestimating our insurance previously. So we need to think about that. What portion is upfront cost? What portion is insurance cost? Because honestly, like all of us here, we want solar to be, the biggest form of new energy, and we want it to go on every single piece of the earth, right? That's at least what I want to be. And so as we do this, we all need to combine together. That's why I really like this panel. Is there's people from all different aspects and all different opinions, and as we keep focusing on this, no matter what, right? We're all in the industry of producing power. We're all in the industry of producing clean power. So if we can combine testing with new technology, with software, that's where we can really flourish, and we can be resilient, because guess what? Weather is not getting easier, right? It's only getting worse. We see it more prominent this year almost than any year I can remember. And so when you think about this and think about what if we have hail and wind at the same time? What if we have flood and hail at the same time? All these different aspects, we just need to keep getting smarter. And that's why I'm just such a big fan of being connected to your system, having software, having data, and then taking that testing and putting it back into a circular logic of saying, hey, listen, vendors, we see this testing, we see these results, now we need to react. That's what's key. Do we change? Do we react for good? A lot of people who just keep doing the same thing and just try to value engineer it and make solar cheaper are going to lose out in the long run, right? We need to be in this for the long term, and that's why this balance in this panel is so important.
Yeah, thank you. This has been a really good discussion and really engaging. And as I'm hearing that there's a lot of questions that are also coming in among the audience as well. So I do want to bring Marian back to get to participants' questions. Thank you again, Kay, for your investigation into the topic and for joining me today and leading this, this session.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Well,
So what?
thank you.
I heard we've gotten a lot of questions that are coming in.
We did, exactly. Well, thank you for this informing panel discussion, and our community has been active indeed, and I do encourage you to keep posting your questions as we're going across them or along them throughout this event. Well, one question has been about the possibility to quantify the severity of or the meaning of these events for the PV industry. So we've talked about that there were some outlier events and that hailstorms have affected PV systems, but people are asking, how big of a problem is it really? What's the percentage of plants being affected by hailstorms in these events in the US? Maybe Kaushik from the data DuPont is collecting, maybe you're in the position to answer, or that would be Daniel from RETC.
Yeah. Kaushik, let me start off by kind of just saying.
Daniel. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to say that we have seen, I think what we're seeing today is representative of, modules that we see that were installed 4 or 5 years ago when technology was different, right? Glass thickness was 4.2, frame thickness oftentimes were 50 millimeters, trackers were what's stowing, right? I mean, back then there was like basically fixed hill, and they didn't have that kind of technology. So I think we are seeing a brunt of kind of a severe situation right now. I think what we're dealing with in terms of seeing this in a kind of myopically, I think we need to understand that cost reduction is real, and the idea that we need to create a solution based on what we're seeing today, I think we're doing a good job. I think identifying first, and then also coming up with the different ways of the material changes and seeing the differences there. But yeah, what I wanted to say to answer your question is we have seen a huge growth. There are studies that are across the board the same way, showing that there are exponentially more installations occurring in hail-prone regions. I think there was a Wood Mackenzie study recently done in March 2020 that we like to reference to show this particular growth. But I think what we're seeing today is not representative of what we're going to be seeing in the future. It's going to be much worse because of the installations that we're seeing. And kind of similar to what Alex is saying, the number of installations in hail-prone regions, it's phenomenal, right? It's good for the industry, but there's a lot of installations in hail-prone regions, and we need to be wary of that.
Yeah, and I think it also seems like we need to also identify what we do know and what we don't know, and then share information amongst each other so that we can really build and thrive in this changing climate and environment. The next question that came in was surrounding the different thicknesses of glass, and I think this probably goes to Kaushik. Have you investigated how the different types of glass compare and comparing tempered glass? What are the results and findings that you're seeing out in the field?
Yeah, I kind of showed it in some in my chart. I went through it quickly, but what we are seeing is it's not so much from the field as it is from testing, because these changes, as Daniel was just mentioning, this thinning down of glass, moving from the fully tempered to a semi-tempered or heat strengthened, as it is called, it's a new move, and it's to encounter the increased weight of modules. As the modules grow larger and larger, because people want more power from in the modules. But combine that this is a new technological change. Combine that with the fact that, again, what Alex and both Daniel were mentioning. Combine that fact with the information that more and more installations are going up in hail-prone or other regions. Now it's almost like a perfect storm, right? I mean, you have all the elements. You have the thickness of the glass thinned down. You have now a semi-tempered glass versus the fully tempered glass, which has much less impact resistance. As I showed in my presentation, I think there was a significant difference in the impact resistance for an ASTM kind of test, a standard test, in these types of glasses. It's just a question of when, rather than whether it will at all happen or not. And I think going back to how do we counter that? I think Alex is, the solutions that someone like Alex's company is offering, that yes, even if you have these kind of solutions, how can you quickly change the orientation, the stowing angle, combined, I would still say, with proper testing at the beginning. These things are important.
Sure.
And I will continue with Alex from Nextracker, because one question has also been about the stow angles of trackers and what wins, because I think the trend towards horizontal stow angles to protect from wind are not the preferred protection options for the module. So at which point should asset managers decide to protect against which natural force?
Yeah, that's great. I think the key is you have to plan for both, right? Obviously, if we're associating thunderstorms with hail, that means both are going to occur simultaneously. And so, as we sort of talked about before, we weren't talking about hail 2 years ago. Well, we weren't talking about dynamic wind issues 5 years ago. And what happened with that is we learned that stowing flat is the best place for statics, but the worst place for dynamics, okay? And so what we've done in these hail-prone regions now is we design for wind at both the high angle, so we can worry about that double jeopardy scenario. And so we solve both wind and hail at the same time if we're at that full 50 or 60 degrees right there. And that way you can be resilient in both case scenarios, because in reality, they're both can happen at the same time.
Sure. And then what analysis exists to quantify and monetize the benefits of PV systems that are more resilient?
I think PV systems that are more resilient, that's becoming a big topic, and the insurance industry honestly is forcing that topic, right? What's happening is we're having a lot of owners come back to us who have had systems installed in, solar happy West Texas for years, and within that, they realized that their systems weren't equipped for what the issues are happening today. And a lot of times people were talking about in the previous question was like, why is this a rarity? Well, guess what? That our previous outlier is to become our new norm for many reasons that we've discussed here today. So having the right technology is key, and really looking at test forms like the IEC was discussed, right? Some of these things we need to figure out more quickly. A lot of times these testing changes come out every 3 or 4 years. It'd be great if the industry, we started responding faster, had something come out every 1 year or 2 years, because really we just keep catching up. And then with respect to vendor selection, again, people are getting smarter, right? What hail mitigation practice do we have? Can you prove it? How can you do it remotely? Because getting out to site is not going to be possible. All these things are just so important because of where we're installing our solar and how to protect our assets up until 2060.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that. Okay, well, this is going to go ahead, and I'm going to have to wrap up this session. Thank you to our audience for your engagement. Thank you so much to our panelists and experts for joining us today. We really appreciate the dialogue that we've had, and also want to remind our viewers that you can go ahead and meet the speakers in the breaks that we'll have after this session. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Wildfires pose significant risks to projects in California, and like other climate and weather-related disasters, an increasing severity and frequency is occurring. Adding on to everything else that we've been going throughout in the nation this year, 2020's wildfires hit California harder than ever. Joining us today is Tara Doyle, Chief Commercial Officer at PVEL, to provide a review of the latest fire season's damage, case study insights, and insurance factors for the industry to consider in response to such events. Tara, thanks so much for preparing this data and joining us today. It's nice to see you.
Likewise, nice to see you too, Erica.
Great. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to you.
Excellent. Well, as Erica mentioned, I'm Tara Doyle. I serve as Chief Commercial Officer at PV Evolution Labs, or PVEL. And I wish I was here talking to you about a more positive topic today, but it is something that's very relevant, and very happy to share the stage with such bright thinkers and scientists in our industry. And I look forward to engaging with all of you in the breakout sessions later. So as for those of you who don't know, PV Evolution Labs, or PVEL as we're known in the market, we are the independent lab of the downstream solar market. We were founded in 2010, and over the last 10 years, we have accumulated over 10 years of reliability and performance data that really quantifies the performance and reliability of solar and storage products. And we get to do that on behalf of over 400 downstream buyers and partners around the globe. We define downstream as those on the buy side of the solar and storage transaction. So these are the developers, the financiers, the EPCs, O&M companies, insurers, basically anyone who has a stake in the project, in the solar transaction. So we test in our labs. We have several labs in the US and partner labs around the globe, but we also get to take our testing to the field. We've supported for asset owners and insurers over 1 gigawatt of field testing. We've done a lot of work in West Texas, which has been a hot topic today, as well as in California, for force majeure and other events. And today, specifically, as Erica mentioned, I'll be talking about wildfires. So 2020, unfortunately, has been the worst season for, just about everything, but specifically today, we're talking about wildfires in California. 5 of the state's largest wildfires have happened in this year, in 2020. The August complex is the largest fire that's happened in the state's history. It's burned over 1 million acres and is still only just 93% contained as of about a week ago. And it's been burning since mid-August. The North Complex has destroyed over 2,000 structures along the state. And overall, there have been about 10,000 fire incidents that have happened this year. So pretty scary and resulting in, as it says here, fatalities, evacuations, structures destroyed. And our governor recently declared a state of emergency in California over the summer. And on a personal note, I grew up camping in the Big Basin National Redwood Park, which has been largely destroyed by the fire. It's been so tragic for those of us who live in California here to lose so many of our precious historic monuments and landmarks. So solar assets, as you can see here, and as you probably realize, are in also the line of destruction for these fires. There's about 30 gigawatts of solar installed in the state of California and up and down the coast here, which is also the path of the wildfires. The solar installations are in the map on the left and wildfires on the right. This map shows wildfires for about 10 years up to this year. And I'm sure with 2020 overlaid on this map, it looks a lot more catastrophic, especially down in the southern parts of California, where there are a lot of solar installations. The challenge with wildfires and frankly, all force majeure events is that when a wildfire hits a project site, some of the damage is blatantly obvious. We've all seen those horror photos of modules having flown off their mounting systems and frames warped and glass cracked. And unfortunately, the visible damage is not always the only damage. Kaushik did a really good job in his presentation of showing some of that latent cell damage. And that cell damage can lead to underperformance and hotspots and safety issues over time. Over time, this seemingly innocuous damage can lead to energy yield losses over time as well. So it's critical to use advanced imaging tools to fully quantify that damage, specifically electroluminescence or in-field EL imaging. PVEL has a mobile COVID-safe incident response team that uses this specialized technology that takes, similar to X-rays of PV modules. You can see the image there on the screen where it gets a really good close-up of the modules, and you can see that latent cell damage. And we developed this highly efficient daytime imaging process. We can image in the field while the modules are still on their racks, and we can get up to about 1,000 modules a day. We were recently in Southern California quantifying damage from a previous fire, about a 50 megawatt project. And PVEL deployed once again our safe, COVID-safe response team, and we observed multiple cell damage that's shown here, including inactive spots, inactive cells, hot spots, cracks. Look at those melted junction boxes. Kaushik also showed some warped and damaged back sheets, which we've seen as well. The asset owner in this case used those field EL images to determine the size of the insurance claim and the number of replacement modules. So in this case, the EL images proved to be very critical to the project and the insurance claim. If field EL imaging hadn't been done, what typically happens is only the visibly damaged modules would be included in an insurance claim, which would need to be submitted in a fairly narrow period of time. And unfortunately, typically only one claim can be submitted per force majeure event. Project stakeholders in this case and in future cases can use field EL imaging to quantify the number of damaged modules. And again, looking below the surface of those modules to include the right number of modules in the claim for that single claim that can be submitted for the force majeure event. Beyond force majeure events, PVEL's team can also do baseline field EL imaging. So that would be something that would be done early in the project's lifetime, like at commissioning, to then, if a force majeure event happens in the future, that force majeure damage can be compared to baseline data in order to accurately pinpoint the damage from that specific force majeure event. So I wish I had a more positive conclusion for this, but I guess we can look to the fact that solar deployments around the world are rapidly increasing, which is a wonderful, amazing thing for our industry and for our planet. And when these global force majeure events that are happening, unfortunately, in more frequency and severity occur, Field EL can be deployed to accurately size insurance claims to minimize losses and get these assets back up and running quickly. Thank you.
Thank you again, Tara, for preparing this information. Yeah, we've gone over a lot of damages so far today, and I'm looking forward to progressing this conversation further now. But thank you so much for being a part of this event, for going over this. And it does seem that there's going to be a lot of data that can be provided as well, and moving forward towards O&M in our next session. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for joining the second session of our Quality Roundtable USA event. I'm your moderator and managing editor, Erica Johnson.
Well, I'm Marian Willuhn, also editor with PV Magazine and your co-host for today's program. Well, for obvious reasons, we are holding this event online. And at this stage, we should all be very well trained in handling and managing online conference platforms. Still, if you do encounter any problems, there's an info booth for you where you can seek help, and please do so. Also, besides this main stage, we have loads of other ways prepared for you to get involved. There's a scavenger hunt that you can take part in, also a raffle where you have a small prize to win, and also you can, of course, network with loads of fellow attendees today, either one-on-one or in a group. And pro tip, while you're doing it, you can open this event space on multiple browser tabs. That means that you can watch the live stream in one and network or play the scavenger hunt in another one. After this session here on the main stage, there will be video networking, and you can meet the speakers of this session here on the main stage in the Meet the Speakers Zoom room. Also, I want to encourage you that you can meet our event partners, DuPont Photovoltaic Solutions and Trimark Associates, in their respective expo areas.
Now turning our heads to the discussion of O&M in a changing climate. Operations and maintenance is becoming a much more critical piece of solar landscape and is the key to long-term resiliency and a competitive LCOE. As grid-scale solar becomes a more mature, sophisticated business, so is the modernization of O&M. We're seeing more and more alliances coming to support the long-term ownership of these PV assets up to 30 years. So today we're going to bring together to the stage two partners within the U.S. market, RL Ray and NovaSource Power Services. First, we would like to welcome George Schulz, Vice President of Clean Energy of the global underwriter firm RL Ray. Hi, George. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Thank you, Erica.
Thank you for joining us.
So hi, I'm George Schulz. I'm with RL Ray's Clean Energy team, and today we're going to talk a little bit about collaboration on the quality to reduce risk. And later we'll be joined by Sarah Herman from NovaSource, an O&M service provider. And we're going to try to join, how we sort of combined our expertise and collaboration to reduce risk, and we'll share a case study. As an insurer, we are essentially a buyer of risk. So therefore, we undertake certain expertise in how we underwrite those risks, but surely we're not in an evolving technology and solar economy. We're not necessarily experts in all things, and so we need the support of industry partners to enable and home our risk assessment. It was actually a good segue from Tara Doyle earlier in PVEL, because I'll speak to that as an example, as well as how we've been able to collaborate on quality to reduce risk. Just briefly, RL Ray it's a Lloyd's of London syndicate. Which means we have strong A-rated counterparty and global insurance services. RL Ray is a catastrophic risk provider for flood and earthquake and things, but specifically what I'm going to talk about today is our insurance products, which focus on technology performance risk. Within the clean energy team at RL Ray, we're comprised of underwriting professionals from obviously insurance, finance, and technical backgrounds. And as I said, we also, since we're not experts in all things to underwrite certain risks, as you can see on this screen, we look at a variety of different risks. But our specific focus today is going to be on our PV project or system performance guarantees. We've developed a PV system loss to revenue cover in order to ensure against certain failure modes, technology risks that would cause output or a drop in expected performance that would lead to revenue shortfall. We evaluate each of these risks a la carte or in the aggregate. The key points for us is to understand, what is the methodology by which performance is measured, by which energy output is measured, and then we would define what the insurance attachment would be. For example, 95% of a P50 production. This type of insurance complements many of the other more traditional types of insurances, many of which we've talked about today. But the goal here is to really insure against long-term investment and in a solar plant or a solar portfolio. So we had a few examples of how we look at different partnerships and how they've brought a lot of value to the way we insure certain risks. And as I mentioned earlier, we've collaborated on a product called PV Plant Protect, which combines best-in-class technical due diligence with PV Evolution Labs, along with a comprehensive and creditworthy insurance. And the goal is to support technology innovation and mitigate financial risk. I think it's the background here was that we had a long-standing relationship with PVEL, and we had recognized that there was a common focus in the way we do our risk assessment in terms of quality protocol, looking at PVEL's PQPs, and obviously bill of materials. So it just made sense to try to combine those and overall enhance our product value. And what it translated to is, I think, some better efficiency of the way we could price the risk and more reliably offer those exposures. Another example, we've worked closely with Envision Energy or Envision Digital, and they have enabled us to create a more transparent claims process and monitoring around the risks that we do underwrite. And that has been a significant value add for the stakeholders in many of these projects. So that's, again, another example where we've worked with various collaborators and industry experts to create better products for our customers. And then finally, I think as a segue to Sarah, we highlight a case study where I think is a prime example where we combined a variety of collaboration on expertise in industry, and in this case it was ensuring the new old O&M servicer of NovaSource, which was essentially the spinoff of SunPower's O&M services. Essentially, the challenge here was that we needed to, or we approached whether we could ensure the underlying performance guarantees of NovaSource in the new company. And what this would enable is their customers to have comfort that they have the same creditworthiness and reliance on the certain O&M services in the new company, as well as the investors in the new company could risk transfer some of those liabilities. So we offered our solar power insurance as a backstop to those liabilities and to guarantee the revenue streams on a large portfolio of utility scale solar plants. The net effect of this is that we learned very much from NovaSource's O&M services and their expert and their teams, because they were very transparent in the way we shared information and understood what they do as an O&M servicer, and could really get appreciation of the importance of O&M in solar plant performance. And in addition, we also relied on the support of Envision Digital as experts to be kind of a second set of eyes. While NovaSource clearly proved that they are very good at what they do and enabled us to ensure them, having that second set of eyes at Envision also enabled us to underwrite these complex risks and have sort of a sense of how we understand, evaluate fleet performance risk, and also looking at just historical incidence response, for example, to really get at the core of what O&M is and how important it is to understand as a partner and an insured partner. So I'll finish with that as a case study, as a segue for Herman, for Sarah Herman, and I think that it's just an example of how we show that this collaboration on risk is very important for enabling the industry to move forward, and as these risks become more and more complex. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, George. Thank you for providing some additional insights into risk management and collaboration within the sector. I think it's really important that we're working more closely together with the challenges that we're seeing today in the field and support each other in reducing risks. So we'll get back to you shortly. I know that Marian has also been looking into the long-term resiliency of O&M as well.
That's right, Erica. I have. And the O&M in the US is increasingly being contracted out to third parties, and that trend is actually indicative of a maturing power sector. Well, NovaSource is one of the largest companies in the US as providing these services, and SunPower and First Solar have recently sold their O&M divisions to this company. The First Solar reasoned that with the need of more cost-competitive O&M, which could be achieved by the economies of scale. So a subsequent, evidently, they're streamlining processes and achieving economies of scale also in the O&M sector. And keeping in the theme with the quality session, Sarah Herman, Director of Engineering and Remote Operations at NovaSource, has joined us from Austin, Texas today to discuss solar O&M in a changing climate and the lessons that can be learned from building or to build resiliency. Hi, Sarah.
Yes.
Great
Hello.
to have you here today.
Hi.
Yeah, thanks. Hi. Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, and thanks for joining today. My name is Sarah Herman. I'm the Director of Engineering and Remote Operations at NovaSource Power Services. I'm here to talk to you about solar O&M in a changing climate, some lessons learned. If you just watched George's session before, you learned about one of the levers that we have to reduce risks for the plants that we operate and subsequently for our customers. And I'm here to talk to you about one of the other levers. How do we do a really good job maintaining PV plants as solar O&M providers in the face of extreme weather events? So when we speak to the challenges of operating and maintaining solar plants, we often speak of equipment and quality issues related to panels, inverters, substations, et cetera. These are all very real risks that must be managed to mitigate and proactively identify issues as quickly as possible. However, solar O&M providers must also work around extreme weather events that impact the operations of these plants. And so that's what I'm here to specifically talk about right now. If there is one sort of takeaway from this presentation, it's that extreme weather really requires that O&M providers are agile and responsive to be able to maintain PV system performance. Globally, NovaSource, we have a lot of experience tackling a wide range of weather events that have impacted the performance or health of our PV plants. For example, in a plant in South Africa, we had to navigate extreme lightning strikes that were damaging electric circuit board components and develop surge protection solutions to mitigate damage to those components in future storms. In one of our sites, or at one of our sites in the Chilean desert, we navigated some extreme rain and flooding events that necessitated the repairs to mitigate some erosion concerns. And plants in the United States are no stranger to these types of events as well. And 2020 has had its share of unexpected weather impacting it. Not to mention a lot of the logistical roadblocks that we've encountered related to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so the main case study for today is related to the California wildfires from this summer. And so as we all know, the California wildfire season of 2020 was the most extreme wildfire season on record. One of the impacts of the fires, as many of us are all too familiar, was extremely poor air quality that lingered for weeks. And so PV arrays saw greatly reduced energy output during the month of August, literally because the insulation was so much lower due to the poor air quality, 20% lower than typical expected values. And so you can see on the graph on the left-hand side, the general decrease in overall production and then the massive drop in insulation. And so we were able to track and calculate these losses with our real-time performance calculation. And the lesson here is really that real-time monitoring remains one of the most important tools for understanding how real-time conditions may be impacting your plant. Once the dust literally began to settle and the air quality cleared, the second impact of the wildfires that we observed was increase in soiling at the arrays over a very short period of time. So panel cleaning crews were already experiencing an unprecedented year with logistical constraints to navigate the pandemic. And so soiling like this, a big surge this late in the season, really required that O&M providers be able to quickly respond and recover performance. So NovaSource utilizes a combination of in-house robotic cleaning, in-house manual panel cleaning crews, and then we also partner with external cleaning crews to cover the almost 800 sites and 1,300 cleanings that we will complete over a panel cleaning season, which is basically from the spring all the way through late summer. And so by using our real-time performance data that I already mentioned and our network of cleaning options, we were able to quickly pivot and shift to address the most heavily soiled locations that were having the greatest performance impacts. And so some of those sites were so soiled that they actually required a double wash. And that's what the picture on the right shows, that you can see the area that is marked 1. That's just after one normal cleaning that normally would resolve the issue. And so the crews literally had to come back the next day and perform a second cleaning to really restore these plants back to their full capacity, just to give you a sense of how extreme and extraordinary those dust levels were. And so the lesson learned here is that O&M providers need to continue to use the information gathered during the air quality performance checks and that real-time monitoring to proactively assume and coordinate cleaning schedules so that when the dust finally does settle, you're able to move very quickly and recover those performance deficits as quickly as possible. So these are just a couple of examples of some of the extreme weather we've had to navigate this year in the United States. As we move forward, solar O&M providers should expect and have to prepare for changing weather to continue, that the changing weather will continue to create new challenges and risks. And so NovaSource Power will continue to use our real-time analytics, our flexible scheduling, and our team of creative and skilled field technicians to navigate the rapidly changing and extreme weather events that we're all experiencing. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Sarah. That was an interesting insight also to see with the ashes falling on the modules. I would be interested, of course, how big the perimeter is in which the ashes are blown around. But we'll get to that in a moment. Let's bring back George up for audience questions. And hello, George. Welcome back on our stage. Erica, you've been watching our online community, and they've been posting questions. What's on their mind?
Yeah, sure. One of the questions that had come in earlier surrounding the EL methodology during Tara's presentation, I think I could be able to also swing this over to you, Sarah. Surrounding whether field EL methodology is currently compatible with drones to take images over large arrays. Can you provide some insights onto this and how imaging is being used out in the field with drone technology?
Yes, so we will use drones for, various types of scanning, definitely what Tara spoke to as well. And we can also utilize it to understand potential impacts of soiling, for example, or to see the progress for, you can imagine, utility scale plants when the panel cleaning will sometimes take weeks. And so to understand and see how those cleaning effects are having on the performance.
Okay, great, thank you. And what are we seeing as far as like the cost for having panels cleaned after weather conditions versus extreme weather conditions versus standard cleaning that would typically be associated with a large array?
So in the example that I gave, where you have to go back, I mean, this particular example was a manual cleaning, and so it's basically the costs do increase if you have to go back a second time. It's the labor times 2 to be able to complete those cleanings. And so that's something that we will often look at before we will deploy a cleaning if it's not so excessively soiled, to look at what is the right cost benefit analysis of when should you bring out and do a cleaning versus when not, if you're not going to see that many gains. These types of examples, even though there are increased costs of completing them, the performance deficit is so massive that you have to do it. It's a very clear-cut calculation.
Okay. Okay.
Let me play that ball to George. Sorry. Let me play that ball to George. You have your company is in the business of providing performance guarantees for plants. So if you have a wildfire and the ashes are being blown around, maybe you are just losing 1 or 2 or 3 or 5% on the production of that particular site. From which point on do you need to clean the modules, and from which point on does it financially make sense to prematurely maybe go into module cleaning when the loss is just very low?
Yeah, it's a really good point. So during our underwriting of NovaSource, for example, we had a tremendous focus on specific plants that I think Sarah might be alluding to, where we saw unexpected need for additional soiling. And in the past, when we looked at these kind of risks, we sort of said, okay, let's look at the O&M plan, we'll endorse it. And it's X amount of cleanings a year. And then we learned pretty quickly through that process that in this changing environment and climate change, there really is no rhyme or reason. And we really needed to focus more on how NovaSource handles those kind of risks, either on an ad hoc basis, and the willingness, and that they have so-called skin in the game to act in a way that will benefit the solar performance and hopefully avoid a claim. So we really had to dig in and focus on what NovaSource's activities were in the past and then going forward. And since that policy came in inception, they've been really good about informing us about various issues that came up and how they addressed them in a very timely fashion.
Sure. Thank you for that. And Sarah, surrounding cleaning, I know that you had mentioned robotic cleaning, but at what point are you doing manual cleaning versus robotic cleaning for the many projects that you're running O&M for?
Sure. So we will use robotic cleaning wherever we're able to, which depends mainly on the type of tracker solution or panel solution that is deployed. And so we'll typically use robotic cleaning for our utility installations with trackers, so you're able to go and clean them more efficiently. And we will always use robotic cleaning where it's available. And then the manual cleaning tends to be for commercial CNI type sites where the robotic solution is not available, or sometimes in extreme soiling conditions, excessive avian soiling, for example, we might then deploy a manual cleaning because it just requires more diligence.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. And then we were talking a lot about, partnerships emerging. Now, there have been a lot of structural industry shifts away from small O&M providers into a more vertically integrated solution. Is getting big and scaling fast the best strategy for O&M, or are there advantages to staying small and adaptable as well?
So, in my opinion, I think the more that we can grow and scale, the more that we can better serve our customers, both in terms of geographic density and being able to take on entire portfolios for our customers, and then to be able to deploy large systemic solutions like the real-time performance monitoring so that we can have flexible scheduling and be able to really be agile to meet the ever-changing needs of all of our customers' sites out in the field.
Okay, great. Thank you for that.
I have another question for you, Sarah. It is about bifacial cleaning. I've written a lot about at PV Magazine about module cleaning and robotics, but I couldn't really think myself into bifacial cleaning and how robotics can help us there. Maybe you can tell us.
Yeah, I think in general, when you think about panel cleaning, it's very similar to, when you have a car parked for a while on the side of the road. A lot of the soiling is environmental, just dust settling and accumulation over time. And so the same, really the top surface, which is collecting all of that, which is really where you need to expend a majority of your effort cleaning. And so I think a lot of the solutions that exist today work for all types of panels.
Great. Great, thank you. And surrounding repowering, as module efficiency and inverter performance and quality improve, repowering becomes kind of a real issue. Are there measures that are being taken up front on the development process that can make the repowering process easier? And is it becoming a part of the development and O&M process?
That's a really great question. I can't speak specifically to the upfront development process, but I know on the O&M side of things, we are becoming more well-versed in navigating and tackling that repowering situation and developing solutions where to make the existing equipment as compatible as possible, existing panels with new inverters and technologies as those develop. And so it's definitely now is the time when we're seeing a lot of excitement and ability to really work through some of these repowering challenges.
Yeah,
All
sure.
right. Yeah.
And if I could just comment there,
Yeah.
I think that repowering is a movement that I think our insurance could really add some value, but it's also has its challenges because we've looked at some opportunities for repowering, but then the question is, what is the definition of repowering, and how far does it go, and where does it begin and where does it stop? So, but I think that's something we're going to be looking at very carefully in 2021 and going forward.
Let me kick another question on that remark to you, George. Repowering often is synonymous with a replacement of some of the equipment. So is really decommissioning, recycling, and the disposal of modules, inverters, and other equipment now under the purview of O&M providers? Or where is this headed? And is it actually calculated in the PPA rates?
Well, I mean, some of the opportunities I can just look by example, and we've again, in the spirit of collaboration and because of the challenges of repowering, we've partnered with some industry professionals to sort of help us through the way they look at it. And so one example is that there was just a full decommissioning, and then the plant was effectively going to be restarted as almost as a new plant. And so that's something we can look at. I think maybe not with a fresh set of eyes as a brand new plant, but maybe we can look at it that way. And then we also have the challenges of looking at larger portfolios where there's been broader repowering across a variety of components. So I think as far as PPA rates go, that's going to be reflected in what that risk looks like and the willingness to do the offtake on that.
Sure.
All right. Thank you, George, and also thank you, Sarah. It's been an incredible pleasure to have you here on this program today. And attendees, viewers, please meet our speakers. Sarah and George will be around for your questions that you can prompt to them here on the main stage later at the Meet the Speaker session.
When we're talking about building PV for resiliency in the wake of a changing climate, it's clear to me that it really is coming down to quality, from concept to completion, balance of materials, testing, system design, insurance, recovery, and assessment. I think that the bigger picture that I took away from this, that now more than ever, collaboration in the industry is necessary, but also sharing knowledge and aiming for higher standards as we move into the next era of a stronger energy transition, particularly as our industry is evolving with storage and advanced technology, which comes into greater focus in our next session in about an hour.
During this time, please stick around and get involved. There are plenty digital opportunities that we have prepared for you in our digital event space. There's video networking, either one-on-one with your fellow attendees or as a group in the Zoom room. There's also the opportunity, as I just said, to meet our experts, not just Sarah and George, but also Kaushik will be there, Jeff will be there, Alex Riddle, Daniel Chang, Tara Doyle, and Kay Kaufmann will stick around here on the main stage to meet them in the Zoom room, and really would encourage you to take up this opportunity. Also meet our partners DuPont Photovoltaic Solutions or Trimark Associates in their respective expo areas, which you will also find on the digital event space. why not play some scavenger hunt maybe in the hour that if we have for you now in between? Also, there's a prize to win in the raffle, or join the written live discussion, staying afloat, ensuring resiliency for Fort Bragg with floating PV installations. This session is going to be moderated by Tim Sylvia, our USA PV Magazine USA reporter. I'm sure you might have read his articles in the past. Also, we will be keeping you updated on recordings and presentations that we've collected from this event, and we'll send around an email for you in the next few days. Well, thank you for now. It was my pleasure, and I hope to see you again in 1 hour for the Advanced Technologies Roundtable.
Thanks so much for attending.